Hi, hello everyone. My name is Jo and I'm an independent cloud consultant based in Sydney, Australia. This is a series of videos where we will go through questions which are very similar to Azure AI-102 certification. I'll explain in detail each and every options and figure out the correct answer. So if you're preparing for AI-102 certification, join me in this video. Now, a basic knowledge of Azure AI services will help you to better understand these questions. Now, regarding me, I watched one training to prepare for the exam. From watching this training, I got insights on different Azure AI services, what are those services used for, how to create them, and much more. So if you're preparing for your Azure AI-102 certification, I would highly recommend you this training. The link to this training will be given in the description box below. The question presents with a scenario and you have to choose the most appropriate option for the requirement present in the question. Now the question is, you have an Azure OpenAI resource named AI1Dev that hosts 3 deployments of the GPT 3.5 model. Each deployment is optimized for a unique workload. You plan to deploy 3 apps. Each app will access AI1Dev by using the REST API and will use the deployment that was deployed for the app's intended workload. You need to provide each app with access to AI1Dev and the appropriate deployment. The solution must ensure that only the apps can access AI1Dev. What should you use to provide access to AI1Dev and what should each app use to connect to its appropriate deployment? To answer, select the appropriate options in the answer area. Each correct selection is worth 1 point. Now, before getting into the option, let us break down the question. The question seems a little bit complicated, but it is a very simple question. So, there is an OpenAI resource and the name of that resource is AI1Dev. So, now that OpenAI resource has 3 deployments of GPT 3.5 model. So, there is one OpenAI resource and it contains 3 deployment of the model. Now, each deployment of the model is for different purpose. You don't want to know about it, but there are 3 different deployments in the same OpenAI resource. Now, you have to deploy 3 apps. You have to create 3 apps. And what the question asks is that each of this app should connect to one of the corresponding deployment in our OpenAI resource. So there will be total 3 apps and there will be 3 deployment and each of the app should connect to the corresponding deployment. And there will be only one OpenAI resource which hosts these 3 deployment of the model and each app should connect to one of the deployment. Now, how will you complete the REST API request or what all values should you pass to the API request to complete this need? That is the question. It is very straightforward. Now, let us go to the documentation. So, use the Azure OpenAI REST API. OpenAI offers a REST API for interacting and generating responses that developers can use to add AI functionality to their application. Now here you can see these are the values you have to pass to the REST API to connect to your OpenAI resource. So what is it? One is your endpoint name. This base endpoint is found in the key and endpoint section in the Azure portal. It is the base endpoint of your resource. So it is the endpoint of your resource. Here the resource is OpenAI resource. So you have to provide the endpoint of your OpenAI resource to the REST API. Next value is your API key. So that is the key of your OpenAI resource. Now that is one of the value and the final is your deployment name. This is the deployment name, the name provided when you deployed your model in the Azure AI Foundry or Azure AI Studio. So that is the deployment name. So these are the 3 values you have to pass to the REST API to connect to our model. So one is the endpoint name, which is the endpoint of our OpenAI resource. Then there is the API key of our resource. Then there is the deployment name. So there may be multiple deployments with same endpoint. In the same endpoint, there may be multiple deployments. So the API should know which deployment to connect to. That is why we are specifically giving the deployment name. So now let us get back into the question. So first scenario is, how should we provide access to AI-1 dev? So AI-1 dev is our OpenAI resource. That is the name of our OpenAI resource. So how will we provide access to our OpenAI resource? Is it a token? Is it an API key? Or is it an Active Directory token? So just now we saw we authenticate to our OpenAI resource using the API key. So how will we provide access to AI-1 dev? It is using the API key. So the correct answer is API key. Now, how will we connect to the deployment? So remember, there are 3 different deployment in the same OpenAI resource. So the REST API should uniquely identify the corresponding deployment. So we have to provide the deployment name. So why not deployment endpoint? There is nothing called deployment endpoint. It has only a general base endpoint, which is the endpoint of the OpenAI resource, which houses all the 3 deployments. So to uniquely identify the correct deployment, you have to provide the name of the deployment to that app. So that is how the app will connect to that appropriate deployment or the corresponding deployment which it needs to connect. So here the correct answer is deployment name. Now the correct answers are, API key will provide access to our OpenAI resource, and using the deployment name, the app can connect to the corresponding deployment. If this video was helpful to you in some way, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.